powerful. We're seeing technology growing at unprecedented rates. I remember when we just had the landline and we shifted to cell phones, and then there was a headphone splitter, and now we have AI call recording. We also now have the thing called Chat GPT that helps us with everything from writing cold emails to creating sales pitches. And while it helps sales teams become more efficient, lower costs for companies, and ultimately allow them to grow faster, it's undeniable that the right tech can be a fundamental asset to sales teams throughout the industry. But we can have help ask ourselves, at what point does all of this tech distance us from our people and then ultimately our customers? So when, if ever, should we ever step away from tech and AI and approach our customers just human to human? And what areas of sales stand to gain and suffer the most from these new and emerging new technologies? And so what you'll learn today in today's webinar, we'll hear from some sales leaders from the most innovative companies as they discuss the limits of sales tech and the need for a human touch, especially when it comes to coaching. We'll hear how they're using these budding technologies themselves, when they choose to avoid them, and when they think it's a great opportunity to be able to interject that, whether using it with their customers or their internal folks. And so a few of the topics we'll discuss today: what should and shouldn't be automated in the sales process? That's a big question that's going around the industry today. What are the most creative ways these leaders are seeing their teams or their peers utilize technology or AI to simplify their sales process? And lastly, when is it time to avoid all of the tech and AI and just sell like it's 1985? So again, I'm your moderator here, Devin Liu, Head of Commercial Sales at Walnut. We have a fantastic panel that's joining us for today, and we'll let them introduce a little bit about themselves, their companies, and their excitement for today's conversation. We'll start with Matt Green.
Thanks, Devin. My name is Matt Green. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Sales Assembly. We do skill development for the go-to-market teams of around 200 B2B software companies as of today. So hopefully I'll be able to bring not only my personal perspective for what little that might be worth, but we like to think that we have a good bird's eye view of what other leaders are thinking about in the space and how they're acting on important questions like this. So I'm really excited to be here and see if I could contribute at all.
Amazing. Thanks for joining us, Matt. Marie.
Hi, nice to meet you all. And I have to say, I would highly recommend partnering with Matt. We've been doing that for about a year now, and we're very pleased with his expertise and what he's been helping us achieving. So my name is Brunet. I'm VP of Sales at Uniphore for the Q business unit, which is a video AI built for B2B sellers. I come from Meta, where I helped build the metaverse for enterprise applications. So lots of like hardware and software SaaS experience in the past few years, tons of different perspectives. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks for joining us here today, Marie, and thanks for the plug for Matt Green and Sales Assembly. I'll add another plug there as well. We're very happy customers and partners of theirs. Aryeh, thanks for joining us here today as well.
Thanks, Devin. I'm sure after the call, I'll be able to do a plug for Matt as well, but just meeting everyone now. But nice to meet you all. I'm Aryeh Abramowitz. I'm the Director of Sales at WordTune Business from AI21 Labs, which is a company that's thankfully sort of in the eye of the AI storm, as a company that set our mission to really revolutionize how millions of people read and write. We do that through two arms of our company. So we have applications, WordTune, which is a writing assistant, and WordTune Read, which is a reading summarization platform. And we also have our AI21 Studio, which is helping developers build amazing products using our foundational language models. So really excited to have the conversation with you all today.
Amazing. So we have a great panel here today. A lot of insight we're going to learn from them, and personally I'll be able to learn a lot from them as well as a sales leader who's trying to use technology to be able to drive efficiency and scale. And so as we get started here, I think everyone here, or maybe even our audience, has seen our We Are Prospects campaign videos. And that shows what it would be like buying a shirt if you were buying software. But unfortunately, buying B2B is not as simple as B2C. B2C, you used to have to run to the mall to get a specific shirt, or you don't even know if they have that specific shirt. Now we can get it delivered straight to our house within 24 hours. But B2B remains very complex and often very frustrating for buyers. So I'll open the floor for everyone here. Why do you think SaaS sales got so complex for our buyers? And ultimately, what should we as sellers or sales leaders who are coaching our team do about it here in 2023? So I'll open the floor here. I'll let anybody take this conversation.
I can start if you want. I think B2B has become more and more complex because also of the market conditions. Like a few years ago, any SaaS product, it was almost the golden years of SaaS, where I think the B2C approach drove a lot of greatness in the way we're selling in B2B. This kind of like client satisfaction, kind of like usage metric that helps with the spirit of every client was one click away from leaving, really help with quality of support and everything. Now, the golden years, I would think, of SaaS is not like they're over, but this big curve is starting to like slow down a little bit with the market conditions. So the buyers' committees are more and more complex. We live in times where people can't afford to make a bad decision. So a few years ago, one buyer, one champion could say, okay, I'll sign a PO. Now it's way more scrutinized, especially when it comes to AI and SaaS, because of the way data is being treated. So now companies are way more aware of data security, data privacy, what their employees are doing with their data, putting it up there in ChatGPT, even like confidential information. So I think it adds to the complexity of the buying committee. But for companies who are very thorough in terms of privacy and security from the get-go, I think it's an opportunity for them to come on top.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points there, especially those golden years that you mentioned. And on the flip side, when we're seeing in 2023, where we have CFOs over our heads trying to figure out if there's any shelfware, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of shelfware happening at companies. We're seeing a lot of churn that's happening in the space, and naturally, on the flip side, we're seeing sales ultimately decrease. And so, for Marie, like knowing that your team is going through this transformational from the golden years to maybe one of the hardest years to sell here, what is your advice, or what are you doing with your team right now to be able to help them close the gap?
That's a great, I wish I had the magic answer to that. I'm still trying to figure it out. We're trying several things, but ruthless prioritization is one thing, because if you look at all the research recently, they show that sellers, B2B sellers, spend less than 1/3 of their time actually selling. So it's about like trying to optimize the time. Everybody telling me they don't have the time, I say, no, you just don't put it as the highest priority, right? So that's the way I approach things. That's one thing we're doing. The second is in terms of technology, because we're all like nerds on this call, we all love tech. It's about, we still need to use tech. There is no way against that. Like we cannot go back to just the Dex fund, the Rolodex and the Excel sheet, not with the quota and the crazy KPIs we have to meet. But it's about finding the right balance. Now each seller has like 7-10 tools to use every single day. And all the time they use those tools is time they spend away from the clients. So it's about finding the right balance, what priorities we have for the business and what tech really helps us achieving those in the short term. And the rest, as of now, we just put it aside.
Yeah, finding a balance to try to get more selling hours there. And I think the efficiency is definitely a goal. Matt, what are your thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that Marie said that really resonate with me. Number one, complex, buying decisions right now, many more stakeholders being involved. I think that is due in large part, and it's not the seller's fault, but the companies that they're selling, right? The products that they're selling, they become more complex. right? So, a lot of sellers have been put in this really interesting position where, and that's one of the things that I'm not just playing to the crowd that I love about Walnut. What Walnut does and how they sell is like, hey, we want to create a better buying experience, right? We want to shorten the sales cycle lengths of sellers, and that is your focus. What you're not doing is also saying like, hey, we're going to streamline, the commission that you pay out to your reps. And oh, hey, we also have this marketing automation component. And, if your furnace breaks, we're going to send somebody by to fix your AC unit. Right. And, that is, the position that a lot of sellers are being put into, that they're being forced to sell these broad solutions when maybe, especially right now, when times are tight and leaders are taking, a really close look, like, okay, what is it that we need? They don't necessarily need, 8, 9, 10 different things. Right. So, the buying committees have become more complex because the sales themselves have become much more complex. Another thing that Marie mentioned was prioritization. Not only prioritizing how a sales rep spends his or her time, but also making sure that they're doing the research. Like, okay, if I'm selling this solution that could do 8 or 9 different things, one of these platform solutions, what are my prospects' priorities, right? I want to make sure that I'm not going in there trying to hit on like these 4, 5, 6 different things that my platform does, but really making sure that I'm investing at least a minimal amount of time, getting a good understanding of like, okay, what is the one priority that is going to be on tap for the revenue leader or the buyer that I'm trying to sell to right now, which can be done. I know that's a big topic of this conversation today. That's where AI will be able to play a tool, being able to automate some of those types of research components before going into a prospect conversation. So long-winded way of saying that I agree with Marie on a number of different components. I also think that it's interesting that sellers have been put in this position where they're trying to sell these really broad solutions, but not being coached enough to whittle down 1 or 2, really big priorities that those solutions are going to be able to solve on behalf of their prospects.
Yeah, I think we start seeing conundrum from what Marie has mentioned to what you've mentioned. We try to drive as much productivity as possible for our sellers, but sometimes our sellers are maybe even going back to back on calls and showing up without doing any of the right research, or even, like you said, coming with a hypothesis or a point of view. And so you mentioned AI being one of those components to, help with that research phase, which is, in my opinion, a very critical element to every single conversation or every single deal. So, Matt, are there some like tips that you're working with on your team, or have you seen anybody using AI or technology to expedite the research process?
Yeah, and I think some really low-hanging fruit, and if you're selling, let's say you're selling into enterprise level companies, publicly traded companies, it's always sort of been a cardinal rule that there's really no excuse to walk into a prospect call without having a complete holistic understanding of, okay, what is that company's priorities and initiatives over the next 2 quarters, right? And the cool thing about selling into publicly traded companies is they tell you every quarter on their earnings calls, right? So not only have we seen not as many reps, really take the steps to actually do that research, leading into a call with a prospect, but where AI is going to be able to alleviate some of this bandwidth is all you have to do is go into ChatGPT, enter, cut and paste the transcript of Adobe's last earnings call, right? And, just type in there like, hey, summarize this in 3 points. I sell this type of product, can you identify the right person that I need to talk to within Adobe? And based on the transcript of this earnings call, can you identify the top 2 or 3 priorities that my product is potentially going to be able to solve, right? So doing that, what would normally take a sales rep, 20, 30, 40, maybe even 60 minutes of research and, control F, trying to find different keywords within an earnings call transcript, now it could be done within a matter of moments. And we do see a lot of really high-performing sales organizations that are starting to operationalize leveraging AI in that way, just reducing the amount of time it takes to be a well-informed seller before you hop on a call.
I love that actionable tips on specifically how to use ChatGPT in 10Ks and researching publicly available information. I remember when I was a enterprise SDR, The control F was very powerful, but trying to synthesize all of that and then coming with a personalized message or a cold call, I started having the issues that Marie was talking about, efficiency, and especially when we have all of this information to us, how do we simplify it as much as possible? And so for Aryeh, what about you and your team, or what you're seeing out there in the space? What are people doing, or what are people in sales specifically doing to try to simplify everything on the selling side?
I think I really agree with everything that's been said up until now. That I heard a few things that it's about focus and it's about priority. And I think even before the the macroeconomic impact and where we are today with today's economy, things got complicated when you have so many companies trying to solve so many issues and addressing real pain points. And I mean, the beauty of it is that it's all real pain, right? And it's all things that could yield real ROI. So if a buyer was getting one good email a week, nowadays they're probably getting 10 or even more, right? And so many LinkedIn messages. There's a lot of noise. And I think that the internal reaction to that was, again, even before budgets were now, dwindled down and CFOs were starting to get involved in deals that are significantly lower than maybe they would have done historically, was procurement and on the buy side, we're going to stiffen up, right? So you have this amazing clash between the inertia on both sides. And I think that you can do two things on the sell side. And what I always preach is like, I want to get to know as quickly as possible. And it's something that we could probably argue about for hours on end. And I've definitely done it before with friends and colleagues. So do we share pricing up front or do we not? Like I'm very pro being as transparent as possible and letting people know, like, is this in your ballpark or is it not? Not because, there's no hard feelings, but I want to know whether it's worth both of our time to continue down this path. So always to my teams, I'm very focused on understanding, okay, we know it's our priority to sell this software and to sell this, communication suite, but is it their priority? And is it their priority now, or is it going to be their priority in 6 months? Because just like we have a quarter that we all want to close strong in 2 weeks, there's another one that starts the next day. So if they want to do that, the next quarter or even next year, that's all okay. And I think on the buy side, by the way, I'll just throw this in there, even though we're sellers, but I think on the buy side, and I love what Walnut is doing with your movement, which is like, be a good corporate citizen. So I encourage people, and I know a lot of people on LinkedIn, let's say Josh Braun, Kyle Coleman, I've seen they've thrown some examples out when someone, basically outbounds them in the wrong way and they'll give some productive feedback. I've started taking that and doing it myself. So if someone on my team comes and we want to buy this piece of software or we want to look into this tool, if I see that the experience is so bad, in a productive manner, I'm going to say, for the good of the ecosystem, I'm going to provide some feedback and see how we can change that. And hey guys, you might want to think about doing, X, Y, Z. And I can say, in my current role and previous roles, some of the best sort of refinements to our internal sales processes came from, comments that I got externally. So I think that there's, a lot of work that we can do on both sides.
I love that. So first off, I mean, just giving back to the community and being able to give a or buyer's perspective to a seller, something they don't get. Actually, I think one of the biggest challenges in general for sellers, and something I've seen for my team, is they just haven't had the opportunity to buy. And so everything that we're telling them about the buying process is so abstract to them. And so you being able to share that back to the community is huge. And going back to how you're trying to simplify the selling process and ultimately the buying process, it sounds like you're a big fan of the transparency sale there and trying to be able to, just make the buying process as simple as possible. As a result, selling gets better. And so as we actually think through, I would say, technology in general, and we want our sellers to be able to push our technology to new companies more and more, and then but on the flip side, from a buying perspective, when we're adopting new technology, we see that there's change management or cultural shifts, trying to get them to adopt something that we think is going to be very beneficial for them. And so question here for Matt, have you ever had an experience maybe in your own sales career where you were forced to use technology that you initially felt like it was maybe going to slow you down in the sales process? You're on mute, my friend.
Sorry about that. That's what I get for taking a sip of water. I'm a
Yeah,
sales.
I think the
Yeah,
biggest hindrance here might be the mute button.
exactly. No, I was going to say I'm a sales guy, so hindrance to me is going to be a CRM, right? Just go ahead and entering appropriate notes in there. God, I mean, I'm dating myself, but way back in the day, I worked for an organization that just lived and breathed, and totally understandable, of course, just decks, right? Decks, images, visuals, and being a small team, and running full cycle sales as I did when I was a seller, getting my head around things like Photoshop, right? I mean, as weird as it might sound, I know that's not necessarily like a sales tech related tool, but it is part of the sales process, right? And especially when the culture of the company is like, well, no, we want to put together these really nice visuals. That was always a pain for me. But going back to my only halfway, decent joke about a CRM. I mean, fortunately, there are really amazing tools like Scratchpad or Rattle today that alleviate a lot of that bandwidth that the seller does have to carry right now, just as far as proper CRM hygiene and keeping all of that good stuff as updated as it needs to be.
Yeah. The good old CRM. I think if to all the product people out there, if you can build AI around this one, I think we might have a really big market there. And so I think and so I think back to even my early days in my selling career as well, when I couldn't get as much coaching directly from my CRO, who I reported to at a small startup. And I remember one of the most powerful things he was able to do for me was tell me to pull out my phone and actually just record it. And when we sat down and listened to those first recordings, my God, one, was it so painful, but two, this is probably one of the most helpful things that has ever happened in my sales career. And I remember back to those moments. I thought it was an initial hindrance, but after that, I became a big fan of just recording calls in general, which led me later to my later years at Course. And so, Marie, and I know it's something you guys do at Uniphore, is record calls as well and use AI to be able to help other selling teams and even your own selling team to be able to just get better. How have you guys incorporated AI or even call recording or whatever it is to be able to improve your sales process?
In many different ways. We have different aspects of AI. So one is like real time. So like, for example, in a webinar like that, AI can join and tell the seller, hey, what you just said, you're losing your audience. So like there's a immediate value, which helps with adoption. One of my favorite aspects is the culture building because of this call recording. And I think, Aryeh, you were touching base on like knowledge sharing. We use our own platform to like, if there's an amazing pricing objection, one of the seller in the team is doing with the client, like real time, we can use those clips, those key moments, because the AI surfaces those key moments naturally. We can share that with the rest of the team. So we keep driving knowledge in a positive way. And then there's also one-on-one coaching, because not everybody is comfortable being vulnerable in front of the rest of the team. So we can do public sharing for the moments that are great and one-on-one private coaching with the moments that are a bit more challenging. So, and for onboarding, we decrease onboarding by 50% because of this. And I love that. Like now more and more in our team weekly, people in the org volunteer by like sharing one clip. So it's a great opportunity for them to showcase also their own selling process and to ask feedback for the ones who are open. I love your attitude. I think more and more sellers now are getting used to it, to like ask for feedback and being vulnerable. And to me, it's a great sign of a good seller. People are willing to put themselves out there and say, hey, I'm not perfect, teach me how to improve and gain different perspectives. When I actually hire candidates, I look for this kind of behavior. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I remember when I started at Chorus over 5 years ago. I thought this was going to be the next big thing, and it eventually had a successful outcome. But in the early days, I saw how much we were talking about hindrance from Matt's part, the reps wanting to be able to adopt call recording. And now I just feel like call recording is a necessity in that perspective. And so as we think about more and more about our sales force and how do we get them to be more efficient and buy into this, increasingly our sales force is becoming more millennial and Gen Z, and in a few years, if not already, on the flip side, our buyers are in those categories as well. And so as we see those shifts to younger and younger sellers, well, Aryeh, what I guess when it comes to technology, what are some of the like positive or maybe negative things we can do with technology for the young sellers on our teams?
So I think, to start with the dangerous aspects of it, I would say that, obviously I think we're probably all in the same boat that like we prefer texting, and I'm much more likely to just give a like to a friend's, Instagram pictures than to call and be like, oh, how was that, location? How was the vacation? Um, but I think what's okay there, and obviously we're pretty good at justifying our own behaviors. It's pretty much okay when it's an existing relationship, right? That's already, a friend that I have this established bond with. Um, but when we sort of fall into this trap of like engaging with people in that sort of automated manner, we look to maybe younger sellers that are coming in today, and everything can kind of be automated. Um, I would say, you can't skip certain steps. So before you've established that relationship, often that relationship with the buyer, or several people on the buy side, that's going to be your number one asset for this whole process. And I think even with AI, people are going to continue buying from people. So if the first impression on the other side is like, okay, this is automated and this is generic, and maybe they insert personalization here, they check that box, but they don't really care about me, that's already a reason why a company might choose vendor A over vendor B. And I think that just from personal experience, I'm love to hear from everyone, but I think that like the biggest deals, like it always gets complicated at the end, right? You're expecting that PO to come back, and obviously something goes wrong. And knowing that I'm close enough, or that I'm aligned well enough with that person on the other side, and I can feel comfortable picking up the phone or sending that text, because we've gone through the necessary steps, because I called on their birthday, or remembered that they left the office early to go to their kids' play, and asked about that. Those things really make the difference. So I think like from a sales leadership perspective, it's important to not be afraid of technology, and we're all selling technology, so we can't contradict ourselves too much. But it's sort of figuring out where that goes hand in hand. And I think empathy has become a sales buzzword, but I think for good reason, because that's not something that AI can generate, or at least not for now.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yes, I love all that. Well, first of all, I mean, Devin never likes any of my Instagram posts, which is very upsetting. Really decreases my self-esteem throughout the week. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Ari, I think you made a really fantastic point, just about at the end of the day, you're still, even though all this can be automated, where you're talking about research, outreach, whatever it is, you're still selling to another human being, or in most cases, to Marie's point earlier on, a collective of human beings. And I that's where we see a lot of sellers really missing the mark, is not making those investments on like, okay, how can I get to know this person at a human to human level? Did they leave early to take their kids to soccer practice? Was it their birthday? That is the kind of stuff that me personally, just being, older school by nature and by my age, on the calendar, you look at my CRM, my notes in there are around, do they have kids? What are their kids' names? What do they like to do? And it's not just the person who's going to write the check, potentially for whatever I'm selling, but all the champions that I've tried to build within the organization. Right. And, I do think that, that's what I fear, Devin. I think to your original question is, where might some sellers that are just entering the workforce right now, just joining our companies, where may they go wrong from the very beginning? It's by things like, okay, well, this is going to be easy because we could sort of do everything at scale, right? And you can't build those types of personal relationships when it comes down to the wire and it's you versus, your main competitor. It is going to be those relationships that you built with not only, again, the decision maker, the ultimate decision maker, but the champion committee that hopefully you're able to cultivate internally. That's what's going to move the deal in your favor versus over your competitors' close one column.
Those are some interesting fields that you put in your own CRM. I think that we should notate. We try to tell people, hey, you should be doing a lot of rapport building in the beginning of a call. And I think rapport sticks to where are you calling from, or what does the weather look like for you? But getting to that personal level and just trying to make the buying experience as pleasurable as possible, because it is a frustrating process and can take long. That is actually a key advantage that sellers can have. Marie, you had something to add there.
Yeah, I completely agree with Aryeh and Matt. That's going the extra mile. I think sellers nowadays struggle how to do that in a 2D world, right? We used to take clients out for lunch or dinners or sometimes on the golf course, but we had time to really discuss business and go over those personal details. Now you jump on a Zoom call, you have 30 minutes. You have 30 minutes to prove you're an expert, because as Aryeh said, now we need to show we know their issues, their verticals, our product, because buyers have access to so much data online. If they take the time to meet with you, seller, they need to get really value out of this 30 minutes call, not just something they can easily find online. And then this personal rapport, where people in short amount of time have to be able to create the connection through a screen. And I think many people struggle to do that. There was no coaching. We got thrown into it because of COVID, and we're like, okay, well, business as usual. Quotas didn't decrease. Market expectation didn't decrease. And you're like, okay, well, you go from a 3D to a 2D, go figure it out. And I don't think we have helped our sellers as much as we could have, because we're trying to figure out ourselves. When we just shut down, it was a completely whole new game. And even if now we meet more people face to face, we're still trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. Now you have to earn the right almost to meet people face to face. A buyer really rarely will accept to meet you in person until you have proven that you're really worth their time.
Yeah, that was an interesting cultural shift that everybody was forced into. I remember when Zoom used to just be a phone bridge for people to call into, for multiple people to call into, and now we're trying to facilitate these living room to living room conversations that are kind of mimicking a face-to-face, but not really. And so that shift over the last few years, either you have adapted with it or it's become a hindrance for you. So I guess there's always an interesting perspective we can give as not just sales leaders, but also buyers as well. And so Marie, you were talking about 30 minutes, we only got one shot to make an impression on somebody. So let's flip it around on its head. What about you in the buying process? What has somebody done for you in the buying process that has really stood out for you that this audience of sellers can really take away?
I think just doctors make the worst patients, we sales leaders make the worst buyers. I'm very picky, all these cold outreach, they seem so generic. And just Aryeh was saying, when you send me a generic outreach with one line trying to pretend it's personalized, those are the worst. People it's all about standing out. In terms of cold outreach, if everybody is doing the same technique, then it doesn't work out. To me, it's trying to find the one ID that's slightly a bit different than the others that works. And sometimes it's going back to old school techniques. The other day, I received a very nice postcard handwritten by someone. I'm like, okay, well, that's different than all those LinkedIn messages and cold emails. Like just something that feels a bit different until it gets popular and everybody adopt it. Then you need to constantly find new ideas, like receiving a book. Like the other day, Nestia like did the proper research, knew exactly where I went to college, sent me a book based on the town I went to college to. So those things really make a difference. And as what Matt was saying, it's about now data can be available very quickly, because in terms of outreach, we all want personalization, but we still want volume. It's still a numbers game. So with AI, you can actually find and have access to the data that help you personalize while remaining productive enough to hit those crazy numbers that haven't decreased.
Doctors are the worst patients. That is what we sell to sales leaders here. I've been a part of teams that sold to sales leaders for many years, and it's funny because us as sales leaders, we coach our team on trying to do heavy discovery and really understanding their pain before we prescribe. But us as buyers, when we get on calls, sometimes it's, all right, I don't want you to ask me any questions. Let's just bring on the demo. And so we start to see that conundrum. But if you can start to, like you said, make a good impression, be very extremely personalized, it can change that mood, because at the end of the day, we are just people. And as a buyer myself, it's funny. I still feel like I get a lot of generic outreach, and those are automatic delete in my inbox. However, like you said, if you find something personal about them. I went to a college called UC Santa Cruz. We had a very interesting mascot called the Banana Slugs, and those are the emails that I always respond to, just because it's personalized and it's very particular. What about you, Matt? What's your advice there?
Yeah, I'd say, and kind of spoke to it a moment ago, and something you mentioned earlier around texting, made me think of this, being flexible enough to sort of meet the buyer where they're at. I mean, Devin, to your point, like, yeah, as revenue leaders, sometimes we want to hop on the call and it's like, okay, well, don't do the demo, just like give it to me straight, right? Having the flexibility to not be too rigid in the sales process, right? Because you always want to be empathetic and accommodate, like, okay, well, what is the process that's going to work most effectively for the buyer? I love it when people that are trying to sell to me, when they just like ask my first, like, hey, Matt, you seem like you might, or, when I work with a lot of CROs that are busy as you, they prefer that I shoot them a text. Like, are you okay if I text you? Right. And, by and large, people ask me, I'm like, sure. Yeah, go ahead and text me. Cause I do love that type of async communication. But then also to Marie's point, automation, scalability, no substitute for just thoughtfulness. And, one clear-cut example, I remember I got off a call once, this was about 8-9 months ago. And, the rep's like, hey, how's the day going? I'm like, oh yeah, busy, my 5th meeting of the day, haven't had a chance to eat lunch yet. And, they gave me the brief pitch. I said, okay, cool, let's keep in touch. And what they did was, because I'd mentioned really briefly that I hadn't eaten lunch yet, later on, after we got off the call, they sent a pizza to my house, right? Now, that's $20 investment, right? It's not high dollars, but that, as you can imagine, right? Like, oh, even if I don't necessarily need this product right now, I mean, this is a rep that I want to keep in touch with, right? And when we do come on the market for something like that, just based on, that one thoughtful touch point alone, very similar to a handwritten card, as Marie mentioned before. Like, they already have an automatic leg up compared to any other competitors that I might come across in the space.
Yeah, you want to talk about active listening, something we try to preach, but there is a prime example of that. What about you, Aryeh?
So by the way, all SDRs watching this, Devin, you just opened yourself up to crazy flood of emails with banana slugs on the title, but that's great. And anyone could send me a pizza. But I think the best sellers that I've encountered did a lot of the work for me. So what I mean is, one time We sort of spoke through, okay, well, what's the business case that you're going to need to bring to management, et cetera. And they literally opened up a Google Doc and we started doing it together. And I was like, okay, this is a person that's actually providing me value, not only the tool that, you know, hopefully I'll be able to buy and that will implement, but he as a seller was taking actions that were helpful to me. And I thought that that was something that was so above and beyond and so out of the ordinary that it's also something that I'll try to do myself. And I think anytime that I can get off a call and say, hey, you know, that guy or that, you know, that lady was so good, I want to copy exactly what they did, right? And I'm going to put a little note, and I have, you know, a Slack channel with myself, and there's so many just nuggets there of information of, you know, few and far between. So I wish it was more often, but where I see something that someone else does that I'm like, all right, I definitely want that to be my, you know, the experience that the people I'm selling to also feel. And I think that that's something that, you know, I'll try to also share with my team. Also just sort of the most basic, like anytime I mention a KPI or I mention a metric that I'm trying to improve, I expect that seller to bring it up essentially every time, or at least it needs to be woven into the conversation. There was a rep that, you know, I mentioned what my sales goals were for Q1, and it just came up, right, like all the time. Well, how close are we to, you know, to that number, and where are we to that standard and the North Star? And it was like, okay, you know, he's probably speaking to 10 other prospects a day, but, you know, he made that note in the CRM, or he put it on a little, you know, sticky pad and put it on his monitor. And he knows that every time he speaks to me, he needs to bring that up, because that's actually what's going to bring me to action. And I think that, you know, just to sort of go back to what we were previously discussing, that there's a lot of, like, you know, negative impacts that maybe automation and AI and just technology as a whole might come in and allow people to, you know, cut corners. And we're talking about the lack of personalization, but I do think there's an opportunity there that people can get really good because they don't need to spend as much time, you know, account research, like Matt mentioned, so much easier, right? I'm going to put that in. I would use Word Tune Read to summarize, but you can use ChatGPT, but everyone's going to have their preferred tool. But, you know, Zoom info, and we're going to have contact details so available. But so you're already saving a lot of time, but now we can, you know, both ourselves and encourage our teams, invest the time in the intangibles that are going to take you from an average seller to a great seller. And I think that that's, you know, that's the message that I share with my team all the time.
I love that. Love that. Wow, 45 minutes has almost blown by here. We got 1 minute left on this webinar. And first off, thank you all for joining here today. The panelists, I've learned a lot from you, and I look forward to continuing to learn from you. So with 1 minute here, let's see if we can just sneak one more question in, rapid fire. Favorite piece of tech you're using right now, and how do you use it? Let's start with Marie.
I'm shamelessly going to name ours. Sorry, but it's true. Q4 Sales, because we use it for like real-time AI during sales calls and for all the post-meeting analysis. So that's why I left Meta, is because I love this platform. Sorry.
Very nice. Love it. Everybody go check it out. Matt.
Not blowing smoke, Walnut has been a game changer for us. Again, you know, we sell what can be a complicated product, you know, on its surface to multiple buyers, and being able to, again, just automate sort of a tour, so to speak, through our platform, showing specific people what is going to be most interesting to them in relatively seamless fashion. It's been a huge value to us. So kudos to Walnut.
Appreciate the plug. Aryeh.
I'm going to go with Gong. It's something I find myself spending hours in, and it helps not only, you know, myself learn what we're doing well and what we could, you know, what we might want to iterate, but also onboarding is just, you know, so much easier with the ability to share successful calls and share, you know, proven processes.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, you three, for joining us here today. Look forward to chatting and learning more from you all in the future. Thank you to the audience that joined us here for today. Again, I'm Devin Liu here from Walnut. Thank you for joining our webinar, Humans versus the Machines.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.